Hi, I'm David Breeden. I'm the senior minister at First Unitarian Society of Minneapolis, a historically humanist congregation. And this is Coffee and Wisdom, when we take a philosophical and theological look through the lens of humanism. The last couple of weeks, I've been looking at a concept called syncretism, S-Y-N, and Wikipedia tells us that synchronism is the combining of different beliefs in various schools of thought. Syncretism involves the merging or assimilation of several originally discrete traditions, especially in the theology and mythology of religion. Last time on Tuesday, I did discuss the idea of comparing things to Hitler and how, in actual fact, this has become sort of like a what would Hitler do question in terms of ethics and morality. Alec Ryrie, author of Protestants, which is a huge and great book on the whole Protestant movement. Alec Ryrie is a British historian of religion. In his latest book, Unbelievers: An Emotional History of Doubt, he has this to say. Once the most potent moral figure in Western culture was Jesus Christ. Believer or unbeliever, you took your ethical bearings from him or professed to. The question, his morals, was to expose yourself as a monster. Now, the most potent moral figure in Western culture is Adolf Hitler. It is as monstrous to praise him as it would once have been to disparage Jesus. Well, that's the idea, is that in the contemporary world, in our increasingly secular world, one of the things that allows that secularization is that we have a moral compass from the opposite direction in Western culture. I shared Abraham Maslow's work on religions and values and peak experiences before. Just as a reminder for those who don't quite remember, he said this: I see in the history of many organized religions a tendency to develop two extreme wings: the mystical and individual on the one hand, and the legalistic and organizational on the other. The profoundly and authentically religious person integrates these trends easily and automatically. The forms, rituals, ceremonials, and verbal formulae in which he was reared remain for him experientially rooted, symbolically meaningful, archetypal, and unitive. Now, what does that mean? Well, by calling out these two different extremes, the super conservative right wing and the super individualistic left wing of religions, and Maslow saying these two have to be put together in order for us to have a real rounded kind of religious, and I would add philosophical sort of experience. I want to talk a little bit about what I call gospel whip and Mish-Mash. This is more syncretism, but syncretism within the religion itself. So here is your Christmas quiz. Where did the wise men find Jesus? Was it in a manger, in a stable, in Nazareth, in Saudi Arabia, in a house, or none of the above? Well, what do you think? Well, the Gospel of Matthew in chapter 2, 1 through 12, says here in verse 10, when they saw that the star had stopped, this is the Magi or the wise men, they were overwhelmed with joy. On entering the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and they knelt down and paid him homage. Then, opening their treasure chests, they offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And yeah, that's the story that we know from the Christmas story, but we forget the bit about entering the house, not a stable. And so, yes, most of the creches out there are a little bit not true. They're using a little bit of gospel mishmash to get those magi there with the shepherds in the stable. Four gospels getting conflated down into one. Another of these conflations is indeed the murder of the innocents, which has been a very popular incident in Western art. We see lots of pictures of the murder of the innocents. It's violent and a lot of movement going on. Well, It only occurs in one gospel, again in the Gospel of Matthew, second chapter, 16 through 18. When Herod saw that he had been tricked by the Magi, the wise men, he was infuriated, and he sent and killed all the children in and around Bethlehem who were 2 years old or under, according to the time that he had learned from the Magi. Then what had been spoken through the prophet Jeremiah was fulfilled. A voice was heard in Ramah, wailing and loud lamentation, Rachel weeping for her children. She refused to be consoled because they are no more. And so, what we see going on with the author or authors of the Gospel of Matthew is using the Jewish scriptures from the past as a predictor for the life of Jesus. This was done by early Christians a lot, and then adding this bit about Herod killing the innocents, but that only occurs in one gospel. And as you know, there are four of them: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Well, you can see various kinds of takes on the four Gospels. A book called The Four Faces of Jesus. I don't recommend it, just saying there's lots of them out there. Let's take a look very quickly at how this goes on. This is an incident of Jesus and right probably toward the end of his life. So we see Mark, Matthew, John, and Luke listed across the top. And when? During Holy Week, day before Palm Sunday, and early in Jesus's ministry. Notice that the time frames are completely different. And where? A dinner at Simon the leper's home, dinner at Mary and Martha's home, or dinner at Simon the Pharisee's home. And then we have someone anointing Jesus's feet. Very famous, again, scene. It's an unnamed woman, Matthew and Mark, then Mary in the Gospel of John, and an unnamed woman, a sinner, in Luke. How? Well, on Jesus's head in Mark and in Matthew, and Jesus's feet in John and Luke. And then who complains? Well, the dinner guests about the waste of money in Mark, Jesus's disciples about the waste of money in Matthew, Judas about the waste of money in John, and Simon the Pharisee about Jesus allowing sinners to touch him and wash his feet. So you notice one story, and we might have that story in our brains if we went to Sunday school, but it is told four different ways. So there are 4 points of view going on in the four Gospels that have made it into Christian scriptures. Matthew is to a Palestinian Jewish audience. That would be the Jews who have remained in Palestine. Mark, a Hellenistic Jewish audience of the Jewish diaspora. That would be Jewish people who speak Greek, who are all around the Mediterranean basin by this time period. Trivia says that there were actually more Jews outside of Palestine than inside at this particular time period. Luke was writing to the greater Greco-Roman world, not necessarily people of Jewish extraction, and John, early churches in Asia Minor. So 4 points of view to tell this story, and the stories are told in different ways. A lot of scholarship obviously has been done on all of this. It's probable that the Gospel of Mark was written somewhere around 70 of the Common Era. If the timelines work, Jesus would have died around 30 of the Common Era. So 70 of the Common Era, sometime later, in other words. Matthew and Luke in the 80s of the Common Era, and John in the 90s. And the Gospel of John is an outlier in being very different in the way the story is being told. Now, you can spend a lot of graduate time working on this. Many people have over the years. Relationships between the synoptic Gospels. Synoptic, they're seeing them the same way, and that would be Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And indeed, people have gone in and said, how much is unique just to Mark? Well, 3%. How much of Mark is also in Matthew? Well, it's about 18%. And how much goes into Luke and Matthew? About 76%. And so there's a lot of comparison and work on this. And we do know by scholarship, we can trace the timelines and how these things were written down. If you really want to get scholarly about it, the Jesus Seminar is probably the place to go. There is a book called The Five Gospels, The Search for the Authentic Words of Jesus by the Jesus Seminar. It is a very sound work of scholarly thinking if you really want to dig in and see the difference in the Gospels. Yes, they are adding one gospel, and it is still debatable about which one that would be. Can the Gospels be integrated into one story? Has been a question from all the way back. It's called gospel harmony. Can the Gospels be harmonized? Well, it's been a question a long time. As a matter of fact, the Diatessaron was written by Tatian, who died somewhere around 180 of the Common Era. He was an Assyrian theologian and the first person to take a crack at putting all four Gospels together into one story. And that continues to this day. The most famous one is called A Harmony of the Gospels by A.T. Robertson. He died in 1934, so that one has been around for a while. It is still considered to be about as close as one can get because actually they don't harmonize very well. But the idea continues to this day, and there are books always coming out harmonizing the Gospels. And also, there are all kinds of lives of Jesus out there, the life and times of Jesus the Messiah. So that's going to put all of those together, trying to come up with a narrative that is going to harmonize with the books, the Gospels. So here's my last question for you. Is religious thinking somehow a special way of knowing that goes beyond a materialist understanding? So, is the understanding of the gospel whip in some way a meta or mega understanding of religion that really doesn't need to be messed with by scholarship? SciPost.org has a good article about that called New Study Links Intrinsic Religious Motivation to Higher Level Patterns of Thought. So, if you think about how to integrate your life in some kind of philosophical way, a religious way, into your actual living and get those integrations, it's good for your brain and your health. The article says new research provides evidence that specific forms of religious motivation are associated with higher level patterns of thought. The findings, which appear in the Journal of the Scientific Study of Religion, and yes, there is one, right? The Journal of the Scientific Study of Religion, shed light on the cognitive underpinnings of the relationship between religion and meaning in life. We always say, well, religion and philosophies are supposed to give meaning to life, but you can certainly study them and not get any meaning out of it. And this article and a good bit of contemporary research is saying putting those two things together is a really good idea. The article goes on to say the main takeaway from the study is that people who are motivated to pursue religion or spirituality and integrate it fully into their life while finding it contributing to what they experience, tend to think in more meaningful ways. So, meaningful ways, healthier ways, cognitively good for you. Get your philosophy or your religion into your everyday life. And that integration is good for your health. So, the takeaway there, keep thinking about religion and philosophy and putting it into your life because it's good for you. Thanks for joining me for Coffee and Wisdom. If you have questions or comments anytime, minister at firstunitarian.org. Thanks so much for joining me today, and we will be seeing you